The crack of the wax seal split the room like a gunshot. Even the chandelier seemed to flicker from the shock. I felt the vibration travel through the polished table into my fingertips, the surface cool and slick under my hand. The air carried a mix of lemon polish and something warmer, perfume, nerves, entitlement. My father's chair screeched across the hardwood, a long, scraping protest that made a few cousins wince. He rose with the confidence of a man stepping onto a stage he believed was built solely for him. Applause started before he even opened his mouth, eager, relieved, almost rehearsed. Dozens of palms smacked together, sharp and bright. My brother straightened his collar as if accepting a crown. Their satisfaction rippled through the room like heat. The metal edge of my Navy badge brushed my wrist, cold, grounding. I moved a fraction closer to the center of the room, boots pressing lightly into the floor. The noise swallowed me for a moment. Laughter, clinking glasses, the soft rustle of dresses, the shallow breath of people who thought they already knew how this gathering would end. My father finally lifted a hand. The room hushed. He didn't look at me, not yet. I kept my posture still. Quiet was a place I knew how to survive. But before he could finish basking in his own declaration, I shifted my weight and let my fingers graze the deed folder tucked inside my bag. A subtle move, but enough to send a pulse of heat through my arm. The applause faded. Eyes tilted in my direction. I didn't raise my voice. "Mr. Hollis," I said softly, "I don't think you've seen everything." The room snapped into a different kind of silence, tight, bracing. A silence I recognized from deployment, the half-second before a storm hits the ground. But to understand how I stood here, calm while an entire family built a narrative around my erasure, you'd have to go back much further. Growing up, I learned to measure a room before taking a single step inside it. In my family, attention was a resource, and Ryan consumed most of it without ever noticing. Every photo on the mantle featured his victories. Mine were tucked away in drawers or left in boxes in the garage. But Grandma saw differently. Her cottage always smelled of lavender and sugar, a combination I associated with safety long before I associated it with her. She kept her ledgers spread across the dining table, the ink slightly smudged where her hand shook. One summer afternoon, she slid a stack toward me. The paper felt dry and warm from the sunlight drifting across it. "Check these," she whispered. "Slowly." I did. And slowly, the numbers stopped making sense. I traced each misalignment with the edge of my nail, feeling the grain of the wooden table catch beneath my skin. Repairs billed twice, payments that vanished, renters charged for improvements that never happened. Ryan's signature appeared beside all of it. Grandma watched my jaw tighten. "I was afraid you'd find that." She took me to her bedroom, moved a painting aside, and revealed the small, fireproof safe behind it. When she keyed the code, the lock released with a soft click, a sound that hummed with trust. Inside lay a stack of documents, thicker than anything in her ledgers. Legal paper, notarized pages, a sealed letter with my name pressed into the envelope. She handed them to me with both hands. The pages felt cool and heavy, like a responsibility forged instead of gifted. "One day," she said, "they'll pretend you were never meant to be part of this family's future. When that day comes, you won't argue. You'll show the truth." I didn't know then that she meant today. Years later in the Navy, I carried her letter inside the same pouch as my badge. Every time sand scraped across the flight deck or a helicopter's rotors thundered overhead, that metal pressed into my ribs. Steady, solid, reminding me who believed in my discipline long before anyone else did. Meanwhile, back home, my father and brother kept weaving their myth of legacy. A myth built on image, not labor. On noise, not truth. The louder they spoke, the more invisible I became in their version of the family. I learned to let them talk. People always talk when they assume no one can challenge them. So when I stood there today, surrounded by relatives leaning toward Ryan as if gravity favored him, I wasn't surprised. Their excitement hung thick in the air, warm as breath on glass. Not one of them noticed how I scanned the room the way I would a supply tent before an inspection. Quietly, methodically, waiting for the moment the fault line reveals itself. My hand brushed the folder again. Paper, cool, sharp, exact, met my fingertips. Mr. Hollis finally looked at me, confusion flickering across his face. The overhead lights glinted off his glasses, creating a pale shimmer that made it hard to read his eyes, but not his unease. Everything in the room leaned toward me, chairs, stairs, breaths caught mid-inhale. I stepped closer to the table, set the folder down. Not loud, just firm enough to make a flat, deliberate thud. A few people startled. Someone's jewelry clinked. A cousin froze with her drink halfway to her lips. Ryan's expression slipped first. My father's jaw tightened second. And when Mr. Hollis reached for the folder's clasp, his fingers barely grazing the edge, that was when my father's voice, usually so composed, tore across the room. "Tegan, where did you get that?" His tone wasn't commanding. It wasn't angry. It was terrified. And no one else in the room had ever heard that from him. They were about to hear much more. My father's question still hung in the air, vibrating like the last note of a struck bell. His voice carried something I had never heard from him, uncertainty. It slid through the room and froze every relative mid-breath. Mr. Hollis's hand hovered over the folder. His fingertips brushed the cardboard, and I watched the exact moment his brows tightened. A lawyer recognizes weight before content. He could feel what everyone else couldn't yet. These papers mattered. I didn't answer my father. I simply stepped aside, giving the lawyer room. The chandelier's light caught the brass of my Navy badge, scattering a faint reflection across the table. The reflection wavered as my pulse steadied. Years of deployments had trained me for moments like this, when the room turns against you and silence becomes its own weapon. Mr. Hollis undid the clasp. A soft snap, every head tilted. He slid out the first document. The paper made a dry, crisp hiss, the sound of truth finally taking air after years of being sealed away in Grandma's safe. The lawyer's eyes scanned the first lines. His breath paused. He blinked once, then again, slower, like a man recalibrating reality. Around us, the crowd pressed closer. Dresses brushed my arm. A cufflink grazed my elbow. The room smelled of warm perfume, champagne, and something else. Anxiety beginning to sweat through the seams of certainty. My father stepped forward too fast, his shoes scuffing against the hardwood. "What is that?" Mr. Hollis lifted the page slightly, letting the light fall across the notarized stamp. His voice came out lower than usual, almost reverent. These are recorded deeds." The shift was immediate. The applause from before felt like it belonged to a previous lifetime. Cousins leaned so far they nearly lost balance. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, fingers trembling as her ring clicked softly against her teeth. My father's face blanched. Ryan started laughing, a short, breathless laugh, like he thought this was some sort of show I had staged for attention. But the lawyer was still reading, and his confusion deepened into something far heavier. "These deeds were transferred years ago," he murmured. "Legally, quietly, already filed at the county registrar." He looked at me then, really looked. "Tegan, these are in your name." The words fell like a stone dropped into a lake, ripples of disbelief spreading instantly. My father lunged toward the table. "Impossible. There's no way. She didn't have access. Margaret would have told me." He reached for the stack. I moved first. Not aggressively, just firmly, hand over the documents, palm flat, grounding them the way I would secure classified forms in a storm on deck. My skin brushed the dry paper. The slight grit of the legal stock caught against my fingertips. Dad froze, inches from me. His breath hit my cheek, hot, uneven. I met his stare. I didn't say a word. Years of being overlooked had taught me the power of not reacting. Ryan pushed forward from behind him, breath smelling faintly of expensive whiskey. "What's the play here, Teague? You forged something? Paid someone? What?" His voice cracked at the end. That tiny fracture cut louder than the accusations. Across the room, my cousin Dylan lifted a hand, awkward at first, then higher. His wedding band gleamed under the chandelier. "I was the witness," he admitted. "Grandma asked me. She said it was a safeguard." Gasps rippled. Someone dropped a glass. The shatter sprayed across the hardwood, sharp and crystalline. My mother grabbed my father's sleeve. "Robert, she knew. She planned this." Mr. Hollis swallowed. "Your mother prepared these for years, to protect the properties from misuse." His eyes slid to Ryan for a fraction of a second. Everyone noticed. The room's temperature shifted, not colder, sharper, like the air before lightning strikes. Dad turned on me slowly. His chest rose and fell like he'd run miles. When he spoke, his voice dropped to a low rasp that scraped the edges of every ear in the room. "You blindsided us." I didn't flinch. I didn't answer him either. Because the truth wasn't a blade I swung. It was a blade Grandma had forged long before either of us stepped into this room. Mr. Hollis lifted the second document, a thicker one, bound with a blue ribbon slightly faded at the edges. When he opened it, the pages fanned out with a soft flutter, and the entire room leaned in as if drawn by gravity. His lips parted. "Oh my, this is a full living trust." Aunt Marianne whispered something that sounded a lot like, "God help us." The lawyer's voice steadied as he read, "Margaret Whitaker grants sole ownership of all 8 Whitaker properties to her granddaughter, Tegan Whitaker. 8. Not 1. Not shared. Not conditional. 8. My brother took a step back, bumping into the armchair behind him. His hand slipped from the cushion like he'd lost feeling in his fingers. My father's throat worked, trying to form a response. Nothing came out. I stood still, lungs expanding slow and even. The badge on my chest caught the light again, this time brighter, like an unspoken salute. The lawyer turned to the next page. His eyes widened. "Tegan," he said softly, "your grandmother did more than transfer ownership. She placed you as controlling trustee. That means—" But he didn't get to finish, because the front door burst open with a heavy bang, slamming into the wall hard enough to rattle the picture frames. Every head whipped toward the doorway. A new voice cut into the room, sharp, breathless, carrying news that would ignite the next fire. And I realized the storm hadn't peaked yet. It was just starting to make landfall. The door slammed so hard the frames on the nearest wall rattled, their glass panes trembling like they might burst. A gust of cold air swept into the overheated room, cutting through perfume and panic. I felt it hit my cheek, sharp, almost metallic. Everyone turned. It was my Uncle Charles, face flushed, tie crooked, hair damp with sweat. He looked like he'd sprinted from the driveway. The heel of his shoe squeaked loudly on the polished floor as he stumbled inside. "Tegan," he started, then lost his breath. He pointed at me, at the folder, then at the crowd, as if trying to catch up to a conversation that had exploded without him. My father moved first. 2 long strides, jaw set, shoulders high. "Charles, what is it now?" But my uncle bypassed him entirely. His eyes locked onto Mr. Hollis, who still held the living trust. "You need to see this," he panted, pulling out his phone. The room tightened again. Even the chandelier's crystals swayed slightly. Uncle Charles handed the phone to Mr. Hollis. The screen glowed with an email notification. Bold, urgent. "County Auditor's Office. The subject read. The lawyer's eyes narrowed. He tapped the message. I stepped closer, close enough to see the reflection of the screen in his glasses. The words appeared in stark black against white. Flagged property inquiries. Attempted retroactive transfers pending fraud review. Dad swore under his breath, low but not low enough. Ryan stiffened like someone had kicked the back of his knees. I didn't say a word. My pulse stayed level. My hand hovered near the edge of the folder, fingertips brushing the textured cardboard. Mr. Hollis read aloud, voice steady but tightening. Multiple attempts were made to amend titles of Whitaker properties last week, using incomplete documentation and signatures not matching registry standards. A noise rose from the crowd, something between a gasp and a growl. My father snapped, "This is nonsense." But the lawyer kept reading. System cross-referenced all recorded deeds. Original deeds remain valid. Flagged attempts connected to accounts under... He stopped. The room leaned in. The chandelier hummed with electricity overhead, or maybe it was just the tension shifting from disbelief to recognition. Under Ryan Whitaker's login credentials. My brother's face drained of every ounce of color. He opened his mouth, but only a strangled sound came out. Cousin Dylan stepped back like he'd been shoved. Aunt Marianne whispered a prayer into her sleeve. Dad rounded on Ryan so fast the air between them stirred. His voice cracked like a whip. "What did you do?" Ryan staggered. I was trying to fix things. Dad, listen. Fix things. The phrase threaded through the air like smoke from a blown-out match. My father grabbed his son's shoulder, fingers digging in hard enough to blanch the skin. The veins in his temple throbbed. The smell of his cologne, thick and bitter, filled the space around them. "You tampered with county records?" Dad hissed. Ryan shook his head too fast, panic sweat beading along his hairline. "I thought Mom said Grandma never formalized the transfers. I thought if I could get ahead of it, Dad, I didn't know she had..." His voice broke. Everyone heard it. Mr. Hollis adjusted his glasses. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed in a way that hollowed the room. "Forgery is a federal offense, son." The word forged echoed in my ears, but not because of the accusation. Because for years, they had forged a narrative around me. Now the paper they ignored was forging the truth back into shape. My father turned on me then. Not with anger this time, with something sharper. Fear. "You knew," he said. The edge in his voice trembled. Not much, but enough that I felt it. I didn't move. The light above caught the metal on my badge again, this time cooler, steadier, its reflection slipping across the polished table like a blade of white. Ryan staggered toward me. His breath came fast, shallow. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why keep this hidden?" Because she told me to. Because she trusted me to wait for the right moment. Because the people who ignored the truth never deserved early warnings. But I didn't give him any of those answers. Instead, I reached into the folder again. The whisper of paper sliding free made everyone flinch, even my father. The final document, Grandma's sealed letter, rested between my fingers. The envelope's surface felt cool and slightly grainy, like it had absorbed years of quiet persistence. I set it on the table in front of Mr. Hollis. He hesitated, running his thumb over the curve of the handwritten M. His hands shook faintly, barely noticeable unless you'd spent years reading micro-movements in high-pressure moments, which I had. My father lunged forward as if to stop him, but the lawyer already slid a finger under the flap. The tear of the envelope was soft but deadly. A slice of sound that parted the room in half. Every breath paused. Every eye locked onto the single sheet of paper inside. And right before Mr. Hollis lifted it free, a distant siren wailed from outside. Long, rising, slicing through the windows like an omen. A siren that didn't belong to police. A siren I recognized immediately. Someone in this room had just triggered something far bigger than a family argument. The kind of thing that arrived in government envelopes. The siren's pitch climbed, slicing through the windows like a blade of cold air. Not police, not fire. I knew that tone. Clean, urgent, federal. The same kind that echoed across Navy bases whenever an unexpected inspection arrived. Every head turned. The room's chatter collapsed into stunned silence. Outside, tires crunched hard against the gravel driveway. Doors slammed, multiple. Footsteps followed, quick and purpose-driven, scattering pebbles like scattering buckshot. My father swung toward the front of the house. What the hell is that? But I already knew before the knock, before the heavy 3-beat pound shook the entryway door on its hinges. The IRS didn't use sirens. Local police didn't approach in groups with folders in hand, but federal auditors did. A chill ran down my arms, not fear, anticipation. The kind that rises when the truth begins to gather its own momentum. Dad yanked the door open. 2 agents stepped inside without waiting for permission, badges raised, the metallic glint catching the chandelier's light. The air around them carried the crisp scent of cold outside wind and the faint chemical tang of winter rain still clinging to their coats. Robert Whitaker? The lead agent's voice was calm but firm. Trained calm. Controlled calm. My father straightened in reflex. Yes. Why are you— We need to speak with you and your son immediately, the agent said. Regarding irregular activity connected to county property systems. Ryan froze. The room rippled with murmurs, cousins whispering, aunts clutching pearls, someone knocking over a glass again. My father inhaled sharply. This is a misunderstanding. We're in the middle of a family— The agent stepped past him, scanning the room. His gaze fell on the stack of deeds lying beside my hand. His expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened noticeably. Are those the Whitaker property holdings? He asked. Mr. Hollis exhaled shakily. Yes. These appear to confirm legal ownership. Then this concerns all of you, the agent said. He motioned, and another agent entered with a tablet. She turned it toward the lawyer. Digital logs glowed across the screen. Timestamps, IP addresses, login credentials. I saw Ryan's name everywhere. The tablet screen reflected off his pale face like cold moonlight. Dad stepped between the agents and the documents. My son didn't do anything criminal. The lead agent didn't argue. He simply tapped the screen with one gloved knuckle. System logs indicate multiple unauthorized attempts to alter county records under his account. Ryan muttered, barely audible. I was just trying to fix it before it got messy. My mother gasped. Several relatives backed away from him as if guilt were contagious. The agent turned his gaze toward me. Ma'am, were you aware of these transfers before today? I nodded once. The motion felt heavy, final. Dad's face snapped toward me, eyes blazing, not with authority this time, but desperation. You knew this was coming? His words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The disbelief carried enough weight. I let my fingertips rest lightly on the edge of the deed folder. The cardboard was cool, textured, steady beneath my touch. She prepared for it, I said. Years ago. The second agent blinked. She? I watched the realization ripple outward, understanding landing like a domino chain clicking into place. Grandma. The lawyer still held her letter, its edges trembling slightly in his grasp. He lifted it again, unfolding the delicate page with careful fingers. The room went still, waiting for words that would reshape everything. He began reading. My legacy is not noise. It is not favoritism. It is not assumption. It belongs to the one who protects, not the one who performs. The words carried the faint scent of old ink, of afternoons in her cottage where sunlight glowed on wooden beams and her safe clicked open with quiet certainty. My father took a step back. His heel hit the corner of the rug, nearly tripping him. Margaret planned this behind my back? Behind her own son? But the lawyer hadn't finished. To my granddaughter, when the day comes that the truth meets resistance, you will not raise your voice. You will raise the proof. The room dipped into a deeper silence, a silence that pushed even the agents to pause. Ryan's breathing sped up. This can't stand. Dad, say something. But Dad was staring at me like he was seeing a ghost he'd long ignored. The agent closed his tablet with a soft snap, then addressed the room. Given the circumstances, we'll need statements from all parties, immediately. Dad's jaw clenched. Are we being detained? No, sir, the agent replied, but delaying would complicate matters. He turned toward Ryan. You'll come with us. My brother's chest heaved. He looked at me, really looked, like I was the one dragging him away. The agent stepped forward. Ryan stepped back. My father grabbed his son's arm to keep him from falling apart. We'll handle this. Do not say another word. But the agents were already positioning themselves, directing people aside, controlling the room with the steady confidence of trained procedure. The house filled with the low hum of controlled chaos. Rustling coats, shifting furniture, the muted thud of boots against hardwood. I stayed still. Stillness has always been my advantage. The lawyer folded Grandma's letter and placed it gently atop the deeds, as though laying a final stone on a monument. The agent nearest me lowered his voice. Ma'am, there's another matter you should be aware of. His tone prickled something in my spine, a faint electric warning. He reached inside his coat, pulled out a second envelope. This one thicker, government issued, sealed. My name was printed across the front. Every person in the room stopped moving. I took the envelope into my hand. The paper felt different, heavy, official, cold. When I slid my thumb under the flap, I felt the same quiet weight I felt the day Grandma opened her safe. And the moment the seal cracked, my father whispered, barely audible, "What did she do now?" But the answer wasn't his to give. It was mine to open. The seal cracked with a muted tear, the kind that seems to echo louder inside your own head than in the room. Everyone watched my hands. Not the agents, not even the deeds on the table. Just the envelope opening, as if the answer inside might detonate. The paper slid free with a faint whisper, thick stalk brushing my fingertips. I felt the weight of the page before I even saw its contents. Government documents carried a texture all their own, smooth, cold, almost metallic at the edges. My breath stayed even. Years of deployments taught me not to react until I understood the terrain. The lead agent stepped slightly closer, not invasively, just ready. My father hovered behind me, each breath sharp and uneven. His cologne, bitter, heavy, mixed with the faint draft wafting in from the open door, carrying the scent of wet pavement after the short winter drizzle. I unfolded the letter. A header caught the light. Department of Veterans Affairs. Another line beneath it. Beneficiary notification. Estate assignment review. My heartbeat didn't stutter, but something inside me tightened, like a rope pulled firm. I began reading. The words sharpened with every line. Per your grandmother Margaret Whitaker's instruction, her military spousal benefits, retirement allowances, and service-linked property exemptions are hereby transferred to you. I blinked once. Slowly. Ryan let out a stunned choke of a sound. Wait, Grandma had military benefits? My father turned sickly pale. Your grandfather served. She never told me, she designated. But the lawyer stepped closer, eyes widening. These exemptions could impact taxation of the properties. This changes everything. The agents exchanged glances, professional, quick, silent. They understood the significance instantly. If Grandma filed these changes years ago, then every attempted alteration Ryan made would hit a legal wall backed by federal statutes. The room began to move around me, people shifting, murmuring, stepping away from my father and brother like the floor beneath them had started to crack. I kept reading. Additionally, upon verification of your service record and designated next of kin status per Margaret Whitaker's private filing, you are to be recognized as authorized custodian of all veteran-linked family property. A hush fell. Even the agent stopped moving. Custodian. Not heir. Not beneficiary. Custodian. A role built on duty, not favoritism. My grandmother had rebuilt the structure of our family legacy using the one foundation no one in that room except me had ever stood on. Service. My father's voice came out raw. She gave you control over everything? I didn't answer. The letter wasn't finished. The final line felt like Grandma had written it with her steady hand, not typed it years ago. Because she shows up. The words pulsed through me. Same cadence, same message she had given me in her cottage. Suddenly I could smell the faint trace of lavender and old paper, as if the safe behind her bedroom wall had opened again. The lead agent exhaled. Well, that clarifies jurisdiction. Dad spun toward him. Jurisdiction? For what? But the agent didn't look at him. He looked at me. Ma'am, you're now the primary custodian on file for all categories listed. That means any investigation, any audit, any protective action. He paused, letting the implication settle. Will require your cooperation. My mother swayed, clutching a chair to steady herself. Ryan's breath grew faster. No, you can't. She's lying. There's no way. But his voice broke before he could finish. The panic was too sharp, too uncontrolled. The reality, too heavy. I folded the letter slowly, military neat, crisp edges, and tucked it into the folder with the deeds. The cardboard edge pressed into my palm, solid, anchoring. Dad stepped forward with a desperate kind of anger. Why didn't she trust me? Mr. Hollis looked at him, long and quietly. Because she trusted who protected her, not who expected her. The room stilled. The agents moved again, calm steps, soft boot thuds, closing distance around Ryan and my father with gentle inevitability. This wasn't an arrest. Not yet. But it was a reckoning. The lead agent addressed me once more. There's one more item. He reached into his coat again. This time, he didn't pull out an envelope. He handed me a small key. Silver. Worn edges. Cold. The exact shape and length stopped my breath for half a second. I knew that key. I had seen it once, hanging on a thin blue ribbon inside Grandma's safe. The agent said quietly, "It was filed with the VA documents, marked for you only." The entire living room seemed to tilt, just slightly, as if the house itself leaned toward the truth. My father swallowed. What does that open? I turned the key in my hand, the cool metal warming slowly against my skin. And I knew, just from the weight, this key did not open a door. It opened the past. And whatever lay sealed inside it was about to redraw the battlefield completely. But I didn't tell him that. I lifted my eyes to his. "I'll show you," I said. "Not here." Before anyone could respond, the agent's radio crackled to life with a burst of static, and 3 words came through, sharp and unmistakable. Additional alert pending. The radio crackled again, another burst of static, then silence so abrupt it felt intentional. The two agents stiffened. Their posture shifted from formal to alert, the way soldiers change stance when an unseen line has been crossed. I felt it too. A shift in the air. A pressure that didn't belong to family conflict or property documents. Dad's voice trembled. What now? The lead agent didn't answer him. He stepped aside, pressing a finger to the earpiece at his collar. His gaze swept the room, sharp, assessing, the way someone scans for exits before sharing news that could ignite panic. His partner moved closer to me, not guarding me, but preparing for whatever came next. That detail wasn't lost on anyone. Ryan whispered, "This is insane." But the tremor in his hand said otherwise. The agent lowered his radio, expression unreadable. "Ma'am?" His voice held a weight that made my stomach tighten. "We received a secondary alert linked to your grandmother's filings." My fingers brushed the metal key he had just given me, the cold contact grounding me instantly. "What kind of alert?" I asked. Instead of answering, he turned the tablet toward Mr. Hollis. A new document glowed across the screen, time-stamped, authenticated, and locked behind federal encryption. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, squinting at the header. Ryan leaned forward. "What is that?" My father's jaw clenched hard enough to twitch. The agent's voice dropped. "It's from the Department of Defense Archives." My breath paused mid-inhale. DOD. Not VA, not county, not financial. This was deeper. The room pressed in around us, air tightening, eyes closing in like shutters. Mr. Hollis let out a low exhale. Oh my. This is a sealed directive. I felt the room tilt again, second time in minutes. A sealed directive meant something Grandma filed under federal protection. Something tied to my service, or my grandfather's, or both. Dad finally found his voice. What did she hide from us? He wasn't angry anymore. He sounded afraid of the answer. The agent tapped the screen, enlarging the header. Redesignated successor for classified holding, Whitaker Estate. A classified holding. My heartbeat kicked once, sharp and controlled, then flattened again into steady rhythm. Years of the Navy had trained my body to stay functional under shock, but mentally, the ground under me shifted. What exactly did she file? I asked. The agent handed me the tablet. When my fingertips brushed the glass, a faint vibration pulsed through the device, an encrypted file initiating. My reflection ghosted across the screen, framed by relatives staring as if I held a detonator instead of a document. The first page opened. It wasn't financial. It wasn't legal. It was a location. Coordinates. Latitude and longitude. My breath cooled in my throat. A coastal site. Remote. Familiar. Because I had been there once, during my early Navy logistics rotation. A restricted storage yard used for asset overflow. Old equipment. Decommissioned materials. Sensitive documents awaiting transfer. Why would Grandma have access, instruction, related to that location? Dad stepped closer. What does it say? I ignored him and scrolled. A second page. One sentence. Typed in all caps. Authorized custodian may claim contents of Storage Unit 41B. Underneath, a signature. Margaret Whitaker. Followed by a date from 5 years ago. My pulse stilled. Grandma had filed a federal directive, linked my service credentials to it, and positioned me, not the family, not the lawyer, not even Grandpa's old Navy contacts, as the only authorized custodian. Ryan's whisper cracked, thin as paper. What did she put in there? But the agent answered instead. We don't know, he said. The contents are sealed, but the alert triggered because her custodian, He looked straight at me. Is now active. The room went deathly quiet. No movement, no breath. Just the faint hum of the chandelier and the distant drip of rain in the gutters outside. Dad swallowed hard. This is ridiculous. It's some mistake, some glitch. Margaret didn't deal with military storage. I finally spoke. Calm. Level. The way Grandma would have wanted. She didn't need access, I said. She needed authorization. There's a difference. The lawyer nodded slowly. She prepared something far bigger than we realized. The agent put the tablet down. Ma'am, we need you to confirm whether you intend to open the unit. My hand curled around the key again, the metal warmer now, the ridges pressing into my palm like a pulse. A storage unit under federal seal. A key Grandma meant only for me. A location tied to Navy operations. A directive 5 years old. This wasn't just inheritance anymore. This was a message sent across time. A final instruction. I raised my eyes to the agents, to my father, to the room that had spent a lifetime assuming I was the quiet one, the secondary one, the dispensable one. Yes, I said. My voice didn't waver. I'll open it. Before anyone could object, the radio on the agent's shoulder crackled again. But this time, it wasn't static. It was a name. My name. My name emerged through the radio in a grainy burst, flattened, metallic, unmistakably direct. Tegan Whitaker, custodian active. Proceed. The device hissed once, then went dead. No static, no follow-up. Just silence so complete it pressed against my eardrums. The lead agent's eyes flicked to me, then to his partner. That single glance carried decades of protocol. Something above their clearance had just moved into play. My father looked like he'd been struck. Ryan gripped the back of a chair as if the floor tilted beneath him. I felt none of that tilt. Only the weight of the key in my palm, cool metal warming against my skin, ridges engraving themselves into memory. My Navy badge caught the chandelier's light again, scattering a thin line of brightness across the hardwood floor. The agent stepped closer. Ma'am, that call didn't originate from our command center. The back of my neck prickled. Meaning? He didn't answer, not directly. Instead, he lowered his voice. We've been instructed to escort you to the site. A murmur surged through the relatives, a rising wave of fear and curiosity. The room smelled of overturned champagne, sweat, and the faint tang of wet coats drying near the entryway. Dad snapped, Escort? She's not going anywhere. The agent didn't even look at him. Sir, respectfully, this is no longer within your authority. My father stepped forward, shoulders squared, old leader posturing, the stance he used every time he wanted the room to orbit him. But tonight, the room didn't move. The gravity had shifted toward me. You're not taking my daughter off without explanation, he insisted, voice tight as wire. The agent met his stare evenly. We aren't taking her, Mr. Whitaker. She is leading. I felt the eyes on me, every relative recalibrating their place in the story. Some with awe, some with fear. A few with resentment so sharp it felt like a cold draft against my skin. The lawyer cleared his throat, voice unsteady. Tegan, do you know what's in that storage unit? No, I said, but the truth was heavier. I didn't know, but Grandma knew, and she had arranged a pathway that could only unlock now, under pressure, under scrutiny, under my name. My cousin Dylan stepped forward hesitantly, as if approaching a marked line. He touched my elbow lightly, just enough for me to feel the tremor in his hand. You sure you want to do this? I slid the envelope back into the folder. The cardboard surface brushed my knuckles, sturdy, familiar, the same weight it had carried since the day Grandma placed the papers into my hands. I'm not walking away from what she left, I said. Not now. Another voice entered, the agent's partner. We need to move. There's limited time to access the unit before the alert escalates. Escalates. That word sat heavy in the air, like a fuse already burning. My father wasn't finished. He grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles white, breath sharp. You're not dragging her into federal matters over some storage shed. The lead agent finally faced him fully. It isn't a shed, sir, and it isn't yours. Dad's jaw clenched so hard the muscle twitched. I saw something break across his expression, a realization he'd been avoiding for decades. Nothing he controlled was built to withstand the truth. He took a step toward me. Not aggressive, almost pleading. Tegan, you don't have to do this. Stay. We can talk. A lifetime of his instructions echoed silently behind him. Be quiet. Stand aside. Don't make trouble. Let Ryan lead. But my grandmother's voice spoke louder now. Raise the proof. I stepped back, not far, just enough to draw a clear boundary between his want and my duty. I'm going, I said calmly. And I'm doing it for her. Dad's face tightened with something like heartbreak. But before he could speak again, the agent turned toward the door. Everyone stand clear. The relatives shuffled back, murmuring. Dresses brushed against furniture. A glass tipped and rolled across the floor with a hollow clink-clink. The chandelier hummed faintly overhead, vibrating from the footsteps of agents positioning themselves. I moved toward the hallway, folder under my arm, badge catching the dim light. Each step felt steady, measured, like I was walking down the length of a carrier deck, wind at my back, mission ahead. As I reached the doorway, the second agent handed me a folded map. Ma'am, he said quietly, there's something else you should know about Storage Unit 41B. I paused. What? His voice lowered to a near whisper. It was sealed under two names, your grandmother's and someone else's. The room froze again. Every conversation died mid-breath. I tightened my grip on the key. The metal pressed deep into my palm. Whose name? I asked. The agent hesitated, just long enough for my pulse to shift. Then he answered, your grandfather's commanding officer. If you've ever been underestimated, follow for true stories of women who prove the quiet ones always keep the real receipts.